Welcome to KC Cares. We're Kansas City's at KC Cares, we connect the nonprofit and business sectors to enhance the quality of life in Kansas City for both our residents and our visitors. This KC Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. It's Ask the Expert time on KC Cares, and get ready because today we're diving into a conversation that can completely change the way you think about nonprofits. What if we told you that nonprofit isn't a business model at all, but simply a tax status? That idea is the heart of the Nonprofit Guild's work, an organization on a mission to help nonprofit leaders build something stronger, smarter, and more sustainable for the long haul. This isn't just about doing good work, it's about doing it well. And our guest today is Sidney Smith, who founded the Nonprofit Guild, and he's helping organizations to rethink about how they operate, uncover hidden assets, and turn those assets into opportunities for earned revenue. Because sustainability doesn't happen by accident, it's built with intention. And if you care about the future of nonprofits and how we move from surviving to truly thriving, you won't want to miss this conversation. Sidney, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. That's an incredible intro. I need you around with me every day. Every meeting I go to, I need that. So
we can do that. We can do that. It's so great to have you here. I want to start at the beginning. Begin the begin, as the song from Broadway, if anybody knows that. How you got into this work. And then we'll talk about Nonprofit Guild.
Yeah. So that is an interesting story. So the Nonprofit Guild was kind of birthed out of this burning kind of like internal passion about the sustainability of the nonprofit sector. I've had the pleasure of working with so many nonprofit leaders over the years as it relates to my previous work experience at a large nonprofit association here in the KC area. And I tell you that we do a lot of education, but unfortunately, the rubber meets the road when it comes to the decisions that nonprofit leaders have to make. And so the Nonprofit Guild was simply birthed out of this desire to really walk alongside those leaders as they're having to make some very difficult, complicated decisions in today's landscape. Things are just changing so rapidly, much faster than they ever have before. And you have leaders that are doing the best they can, serving communities the best they can, but things are just changing so rapidly, and they need to have some people that can come alongside them and offer guidance and some direction and some perspective that they might not get in their day-to-day work. And so that's really what I'm here to do.
Can you go back even further? No, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you, but give us a little background of where you came from and how you talked most recently, I know, but was this something, I'm going to college and I'm going to major in sustainability for nonprofits?
Yeah.
So what is that background that got you into this kind of work?
That definitely was not it, Ruth. I tell you what. So kind of going back, I tell you, I'm just a kid from Kansas City, right? Through and through. I love this city. I went to school at Mizzou, so go Tigers. For all of my Jayhawks fans out there, let's we'll leave that to another call. But seriously, I think that when I was in college, I knew that I had a burning passion for business. And so my undergrad is in business administration with the emphasis in marketing. I really saw business as the great equalizer for somebody that's from the east side of Kansas City, all of the social determinants of health that you hear about nowadays when it comes to, kind of the ills that affect lower socioeconomic families. I was a part of all of that. And so I really saw business as this opportunity to learn about what makes the world move, especially in a capitalistic society, and how can I find my place in that? And so that's what drove me during my earliest years. And I tell you, the vast majority of my adult career was in healthcare. And so people that know me prior to my time in the nonprofit sector know me for being a nursing home administrator, senior care, senior living facilities. And I did that throughout the 20 teens. and into the early 2020s, where we know there was this little pesky thing called COVID-19 that was had non nursing homes at the center at its bullseye in its
Yes.
crosshairs, and I learned a lot. And it offered a perspective that I think I'm so grateful for now, but it was super stressful in the moment for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of us will go back and think pandemic perspective, and what rather than, it was a hair on fire time for sure,
Yeah, I don't
but
have any
lots
left.
of
You see.
but lessons learned and taken away from that. So I mean, that's a crazy industry. It is truly a crazy industry, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. So you hop into the nonprofit community with that background, a true business background. What were those first things that you saw that made you go, now wait a minute, maybe this could all be done a little bit better?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the major eye-opening moments for me was when I was in my executive MBA program. Shout out to Rockhurst University. If you're considering some graduate studies, I definitely would highly recommend Rockhurst. They treated me and my classmates so well. But the conversations we were having in those classes, where we had probably 20 or so executives from across all industries, mostly for profit. There was a handful of us nonprofit leaders in there, but it was dominated by for profit executives. And I would tell you that one of the things that really stood out to me was just the amount of time that we would talk about those business fundamentals, revenues, expenses, marketing. Do people know we exist? What's our unique selling proposition, right? All of these things that drives business, and yet, I understood very acutely that the nonprofits that I was working with and working for were businesses too. We had to answer those same questions, but oftentimes we get caught up in focusing on the mission work, like that charitable
Mm-hmm.
purpose that we were created for, that we start to lose sight. We begin to run out of time and attention when it comes to those business fundamentals. And I think that was something that I'm just wired to think business first. And so I saw that as an opportunity to really try to lift up a conversation that I wasn't hearing enough about, at least in my opinion, when it came to the sector.
To be honest, when I talk about the business side of things, sometimes it can be scary because you have this mission and you have it in your heart, um, and we know we have all kinds of nonprofits here. Many are that founder passion. I'm going to go help cure pediatric cancer for kids, or I want to help make sure that there's some equity in the mental health space, be it whatever you're trying to do. The business side sometimes is a little scary or a
Yeah.
little intimidating. Maybe
Yeah.
intimidating is the better thing. I hear from nonprofit leaders, particularly small. I mean, where do I begin? How do I do this?
Right.
So let's talk about that. Let's lay that out on the table.
Yeah.
Dr. Sustainability.
Yeah, I think that one of the main things that I think about a lot is I think many people lose sight of the fact that first and foremost, our nonprofits started out as business entities. So when you think about the formation of a nonprofit, and I know this because I help founders, kind of go through that 501(c)(3) application process. The very first thing you have to do is you have to establish a business entity with your Secretary of State. So the very first foundational piece of even getting to a tax exempt status is you have to establish a corporation, right? You have to
Mhm.
establish a business entity. And so if we think through that the foundation of everything that we get to do from a charitable perspective starts with business. I think that's one of the things that I try to highlight. And then you think about us then adding on the layer of charitable purpose on top of that business. But in my mind and in many of the people that kind of think like me, the foundation has always been the business entity first and foremost, and the business fuels the charitable purpose and the mission work that we get to do on a daily basis.
So in those beginning stages, and many times again, people will say, "Oh my gosh, to have to do a 501(c)(3) is so off-putting. Forget it. I'm not doing this." So kudos to those that stay the course and get to that point.
Yeah.
Kind of lift us as to where does one move next as a nonprofit with that business focus
Yeah,
front and center.
absolutely. I think that if we can be real and I try to I'm a self-described pragmatist, and so I'm optimistic, but I also root all of my conversations in the realities of where we are. First and foremost, we have to recognize kind of the environment in which we're operating in. I like to kind of offer the contrast of when we were in the COVID kind of like that era. Money was flowing freely. We had American Rescue Plan Act dollars; those ARPA dollars were coming. Things were in a much different environment from a federal administration. We had some opportunities that we don't necessarily have as much of right now. And so I think that being able to offer nonprofit leaders just the recognition of a couple of things. Number one, there's only two types of revenue. You have contributed revenue and you have earned revenue. And so what we need to do is we need to be mindful that we always need to have the contributed revenue model. We always need to have those strategies, grant applications, individual donors, major donors, bequests, planned giving. All of those things are very much a part of the natural nonprofit kind of ethos and ecosystem. But what I
Mhm.
want us to start doing is looking at the earned revenue side, right? Those abilities to be able to go to the marketplace and say, hey, in exchange for this product or service, we're looking to receive some level of market compensation through dollars to be able to offer those services. It might be a membership model. It may be contracted revenue. It may be any number of other different revenue models that are available to us, but we oftentimes ignore because we're so focused on grant applications, donors, bequests, planned giving, and all those other types of contributed revenue.
Why is the word earned revenue scary for a
Yeah.
nonprofit?
I think it's scary because it has not been the focus of what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis. You see, there's this book that I absolutely love. It's called Nonprofit Sustainability. And what it does is it introduces the at least it's my first introduction to it. Maybe somebody else had it before this, but I give that attribute to the nonprofit sustainability book. What it talks about is this dual bottom line, this need for us to not only have the bottom line that every business has, which is the financial bottom line, but there's also this need for us to fulfill the charitable purpose in which we got our tax exemption to perform. Okay. And
Mhm.
so I think that earned revenue is kind of this scary term, or for some it might be a dirty word because we've always assumed that the charitable purpose was the only thing that we could do to maintain our tax exempt status. I think that because we haven't focused on earned revenue, we may assume that we can't do it, or that it's too like for profits, and what we do is
Right.
we may some of us may, kind of demonize the for-profit sector because, we're doing the good work and they're out there sucking up all of the resources and doing all the bad things. And it really isn't like that, right? Like business is just what it is. It is an exchange of something in for something of value, right? So products or services in exchange for monies. And so I think that if we're able to kind of bring about maybe some of less of the emotion behind revenue, right? And so, we can talk about earned revenue and contributed revenue, but it's still all revenue at the end of the day. And if we can look at it through that very unemotional, pragmatic lens, I think it allows us to maybe remove some of that stigma that earned revenue may have.
So with that lens in mind, is there a certain like percentage a nonprofit should have of earned versus contributed?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's no, unfortunately, right? Like with most things in life, right? There's no definitive answer or definitive formula. What I would tell you is that the vast majority of nonprofit organizations start out and remain in that sub $1 million in annual revenue. And so, if I want to say maybe 70-80% of nonprofits fall in that sub $1 million category, so less than $1 million a year in annual revenue. And so, most of those organizations rely primarily on contributed revenue. But as you start to scale to higher levels, right, and this is something that was
Hmm.
highlighted in the Stanford Social Enterprise Review, something like that, Innovation Review, Stanford Social Innovation Review. Some articles talked about, some of your larger nonprofits that are 2 million, 3 million plus in annual revenue. They have maybe 25, 30% of their revenues coming from earned revenue. And so oftentimes it's never going to be the primary driver of revenue, but anywhere from, if even if you're able to have 10% of your revenues in the earned revenue category, imagine a $250,000 a year annual revenue and you were able to count on roughly $25,000 every single year in earned revenue, that would be an incredible grant that we would be happy to receive each and every year. But because it's in the earned revenue category, we don't necessarily look at it the same. But if we're able to start to build some of those muscles around earned revenue, those are the sorts of things that's that recurring revenue that you can more readily depend on than you would necessarily grant revenue from foundations that may or may not fund you year over year.
We're talking with Sidney Smith. He is the founder, owner, creator of the Nonprofit Guild, and we're talking about sustainability and from a business financial perspective. All right, so you say we ought to be looking at that as nonprofit. So how does an organization go about taking a look to see where earned revenue can come from?
I love that question. It comes with first and foremost making the decision, right? Like most everything in life is about having an intention placed and then moving towards that. So I think the first thing that I encourage nonprofit leaders to do is to be willing to make the decision to explore earned revenue first and foremost. Once you make that decision, we don't go and dump a whole bunch of resources into something that we don't know is going to be a proven model for us to really scale. And so what we do is this thing called Jim Collins, the author of the book Good to Great. It's a book that's familiar with many of us in the business sector and is a must read for many grad students. But what that book kind of talks about is what separates the good companies from the truly great ones, right? There's tons of AI companies, but what made OpenAI and ChatGPT the one, right? And others
Right.
like Claude and Anthropic and all of that. What separates them from all of those smaller ones? And so the one of the main things that you talk about is the willingness to experiment. It's what Jim Collins calls fire bullets then cannonballs, right? I apologize for the violent language, but that's what he calls it, right? And so what he talks about is these small experiments, right? Or the bullets, these small experiments that we try to say, hey, maybe we'll try this to half a dozen people in our network. Let's see how they respond to this. Once we get feedback, then we may be able to take that small sample size and extrapolate and say, hey, maybe we could scale this if we make a tweak here or there. And so that's when you start to pour more resources into it. And so what I encourage leaders to do is first and foremost, make a decision that you want to start experimenting and be a little bit more innovative when it comes to earned revenue. The second thing you do is let's get aligned with something that you do as a nonprofit, your charitable purpose, but something that the marketplace, right, the greater business environment may value, something that you might be able to offer at a market rate. And then from there, we'll try some little experiments, get some feedback, determine if that's a good model for us to follow. And then from there, we look to scale it. We pour more resources into it, we pour more attention into it. And hopefully over time, it doesn't happen overnight, Ruth. I want to make sure that everybody knows this isn't something that happens overnight. But if you're intentional about it, it compounds year over year. And next thing you know, you'll have a earned revenue model that you can feel solid about year over year.
All right, you've given a great pep speech here. Get us motivated.
Yeah.
You're sitting as the head of a nonprofit, or maybe you're the director of development, or chief revenue officer, or chief financial officer.
Mhm.
Who do you pull to the table and how do you go?
Yeah. Oh, it's a
Because
great question.
you want to keep the doors open doing what you do
Yeah,
mission wise.
absolutely. Yeah, I think all of your some of your most some of your favorite businesses out there, right? I'm an Android guy, so I never fell into the Apple Mac ecosystem. Those of us that are Android lovers, it's always a us versus them. But seriously, though, I think that we take from those sorts of businesses what we know to be true. All of a sudden, Apple didn't just decide that, hey, we're going to stop focusing on the personal computer and we're going to go into iPods, right? We're going to go into music streaming. What they did is they decided that, hey, you know what? We have an idea of what the future may look like. We're going to start putting some little miniature bets out there, start putting just a little bit of resources behind some research and development, some small experiments. Let's see what happens. And I think that that's what I encourage nonprofits to really do. So, what do you need to do? Your team, depending on the size, right? You want to make sure that you have your board of directors on board, right? You want to make sure that from a visioning perspective, that the board is on board with you, looking at some innovative ideas moving forward, and understanding that it might take a reallocation of a bit of resources, but nothing that's going to put the business or the organization in jeopardy. But you get your board of directors on board. Then you have an executive director or a leader, whomever that might be, a founder that understands that, hey, we're going to make some mini experiments. Then from there, the major thing comes about really engaging those stakeholders, right? Going to your community and saying, hey, you know what? We're looking to be more sustainable. We want to be able to be here for you for years and maybe decades to come. But for us to do that, we need to start looking at some new ways in which we generate revenue. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to do it. Maybe it's a monthly membership opportunity. Maybe it's something like a reconciliation services here locally, right? They have Thelma's Kitchen. Thelma's Kitchen
Right.
offers boxed lunches and catering, those sorts of things. Somebody had to come to that table at Reconciliation Services and say, hey, I think this is something that the community could benefit from, something that we may be able to, turn some level of profit or have some type of earned revenue from. Let's see what we can do. And so I think if you're able to get board on board, right? You get the
Uh-huh.
leader to be able to try some experiments, get your stakeholders that support the organization. Maybe it's a major donor, maybe it's philanthropy, but it's like, hey, we want to try this thing. Would you be willing to support us in some way? You take that information and then you determine, is it a good idea or is it not? Because guess what? Not every idea is a good one. And so you get some information, you determine if it's something that you want to proceed with, and you go from there.
How important, or is it important, that your earned revenue have some connection to mission?
I think it's super important. I think it's more important now than maybe it's ever been before, Ruth. And I say that because I believe, right, this is Sydney's viewpoint. I believe that we are in a trust recession right now. I believe that we are in a place and time where things are just moving so fast that it's hard for us to really wrap our head or our arms around where we're at right now. Right? You got AI, and so you got all of these things that, these videos that may or may not be real. We got, AI hallucinating and giving us results that may or may not have actually happened, right? Like there's so much of newness right now that so many people don't necessarily know if they can trust what's in front of them. You add
True.
on top of that, the headlines that, maybe one or two, organizations that, are brought into the mainstream. I think about, some of those organizations up there in Minnesota that, all we heard about was fraud, 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 right? And that gets politicized. And so that unfortunately trickles down to all of us as nonprofits, right? And so I think that we're in a place now to where we need to be mindful of the fact that people may not trust in the same ways that they did before. And
Mhm.
as such, we need to make sure that what we're looking to do from an earned revenue model looks to at least support or supplement what we do from a charitable purpose perspective. I think it just helps to provide that we don't, what's the word I'm looking for, that we don't jeopardize the contributed revenue, right? Donations and grants and those sorts of things from foundations. We don't jeopardize that trust at the expense of trying to generate some type of earned revenue. So my thought process is simply, hey, understand that we're in a place to where some may not feel as confident in our sector as they once did, and so we have to be uber transparent and make sure that we're aligning with the stuff that we were set out to do.
We just have a couple minutes left. What would you
Yeah,
say would be the number one thing that a nonprofit should or can do to get started with this
yeah.
concept?
I think the number one thing, as I mentioned before, is make the decision. Um, and I encourage you to make the decision because one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm talking with nonprofit leaders, Ruth, is the feeling of a lack of control. Right? They
Mm.
feel that they don't, despite all of the work and the hours that they put in each and every day, each and every week, them and their teams, they still feel a sense of I don't control the future of our organization because funders make the funding decision, donors make the donations decisions, and you may do everything right, and it still may not lead to funding. And so, what I encourage leaders to think about is if you want to start to take maybe just a little more control, right? You never can make somebody spend money with you, but the market values what the market values. And so, when you have those small experiments and you're able to say, hey, you know what? I bring them up again somewhere like Thelma's Kitchen. It's like, yeah, we value having an organization that provides quality food, box lunches, and it supports a great mission. Yeah, we want to support that each and every time that we have a meeting, right? And when you're able to have those things in place, I think that it allows you to be able to then make a determination. Hey, do we put more resources in this? Or do we look to maybe try something else? But I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to make the decision of do we want to start maybe taking a little bit more control over the revenue that we bring in month over month, year over year? And if so, earned revenue is probably a place that we should start to look.
Sidney, thank you for being our expert. I want to tell everybody go check out the Nonprofit Guild. It's thenonprofitguild.com. He's got
Yes.
great information there. Connect with Sidney. Thank you for taking this little walk with us.
Thank you for having me. I always love to preach on the pulpit from earned revenue and really making our nonprofits more sustainable. The work that we do in our communities is far too important to not be here long term. And so if earned revenue is something that you haven't looked at before, please feel free to reach out to me. Would love to help. I also want to, if I get a moment, Ruth, I want to tag on my website. I have an assessment. It's free. Take it. And what it does is it gives you kind of a snapshot. I call it a nonprofit business audit. And what it does is it just gives you a snapshot across 8 different business domains: marketing, financial sustainability, strategic clarity, people and culture, right? And it just asks you questions to say, hey, how do you feel about these different areas? Gives you a score and maybe gives you somewhere to kind of start from to say, hey, we want to start paying a little bit more attention to those areas. Yeah.
Great. Check it out. And thank you. for joining us on Casey Cares. This Casey Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. Now look, you can spread the love and find us on Facebook and Twitter at Casey Cares Radio and Instagram at Casey Cares Online. And don't forget, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m., you can catch us on ESPN 1510 a.m. and 94.5 FM. Thanks for joining us on Casey Cares.